I set up a hidden camera in my living room to catch my husband cheating. What I found out, instead, shattered me. When my husband started acting strange, I suspected the worst. I decided to get actual proof of his betrayal. But what I discovered broke me down in tears. Luckily, the truth brought us closer than ever. I had always thought of myself as a reasonable person, the kind of woman who didn't jump to conclusions, who approached problems with a calm mind and a steady heart. I was proud of that. It helped me navigate life's challenges, until it came to my marriage. When it came to Damien, all that sense and calm seemed to fall apart. For weeks, maybe even months, a dark, heavy cloud of doubt hovered over me. It followed me everywhere, whispering worries I didn't want to acknowledge. I suspected my husband was cheating on me, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the thought wouldn't leave me alone. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia. People go through rough patches, I told myself. Maybe Damien was just going through one of those stressful phases at work. Maybe I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Damien used to fill our home with laughter. His voice had once echoed through our halls with joy, and his smile used to light up a room, but that man had slowly started to disappear. In his place was someone colder, quieter. He had become withdrawn, like he was shrinking into himself. Our conversations grew shorter. He stopped sharing the little details of his day, and even when he was home, it was like he wasn't really there. It started small. He missed dinner once or twice. Then it became more regular. He began working late more often, offering vague explanations. He grew protective of his phone, carrying it everywhere, even into the bathroom, and keeping the screen hidden when messages popped up. It buzzed constantly, and when I asked who it was, he would just shrug and say, "It's nothing." At first, I let it go. We all have private lives, I reasoned, but then the lies started slipping through. Small ones at first, about where he had been or how much he had spent. I began noticing gaps in our bank statements, missing money he couldn't quite explain. And every time I questioned him, he'd look at me with those tired, unreadable eyes and say, "It's just work, Lacy. Nothing to worry about." But his words didn't match his actions. They felt hollow, empty. The smile he forced never reached his eyes. I tried so hard to trust him. I told myself that trust was the foundation of any marriage, but trust has limits, and mine was slowly crumbling. The final straw came one night when he stumbled through the front door long after midnight. The smell of whiskey hit me before I even saw him. His steps were heavy, and he didn't say a word as he made his way to the bedroom. He collapsed onto the bed without a glance in my direction. I sat there in the dark, my heart pounding with a mix of fear, sadness, and fury. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, knowing I couldn't go on like this. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. I'm not proud of what I did next, but if you were in my position, maybe you'd understand. Maybe you would have done the same. The next day, I pulled out an old nanny camera we used to have when our niece would visit. I hadn't touched it in years, but it still worked. My hands trembled as I set it up in our living room. I chose a spot near the bookshelf, hidden behind a row of framed photos. From there, it would capture everything that happened in the room without being too obvious. As I adjusted the angle, my mind raced with worst-case scenarios. I prepared myself to see something devastating. Another woman, perhaps. Someone younger, someone who made him laugh like he used to with me. I could already feel the sharp sting of betrayal, even before I had seen a thing. But I had to know. I had to stop living in the space between fear and hope. I hated the idea of spying on Damien. It made my stomach twist with guilt, but the need to know was stronger. The not knowing was slowly breaking me down. I couldn't keep living in a house full of silence and shadows, so I turned the camera on. For the first few days, I couldn't bring myself to look at the footage. The camera sat quietly, recording in the background, while I went about my days with a storm brewing silently in my chest. I told myself I needed time, that I wasn't ready to face the truth. But the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of what I might see. Terrified that my deepest fears would be confirmed. The tension in our home kept growing. Damien barely spoke. He moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding my eyes, avoiding any meaningful interaction. Even the way he walked had changed. His shoulders hunched, his steps heavier, slower. I wanted to believe he was just tired, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I couldn't take it anymore. One evening, after another silent dinner and another night where Damien disappeared into himself without a word, I found myself alone in the living room. The light above me buzzed softly. The air felt thick. My laptop sat on the table waiting. With trembling hands, I opened it and pulled up the footage. My heart thundered in my chest as the video loaded. I pressed play. There he was, Damien coming home after work. He looked the same as he had every night for the past several weeks. Drained, shoulders slumped, eyes distant. He didn't turn on the lights. He just walked into the room, dropped his keys on the side table, and collapsed onto the couch. I watched as he sat there in the darkness, his face hidden in his hands. For a brief moment, a wave of sympathy rose inside me. He looked so lost, but I forced it down. I wasn't here to feel sorry for him. I needed answers. I fast-forwarded through the footage, watching minutes tick by on the timestamp. Damien barely moved. He just sat there, still as stone. The silence felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. Then something changed. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, the one he always kept zipped up. My breath caught as he pulled out an envelope and slowly unfolded a letter. His hands trembled as he held it up to read. His face was barely lit by the faint light from the street outside, but it was enough. That's when I saw it. The tears. At first, just a few. Slow and silent, then more. His shoulders began to shake, his face crumpling as he buried it into the paper. He didn't sob loudly. It wasn't a dramatic outburst, but it was real, raw. My husband, who I had never once seen cry in 10 years of marriage, was breaking apart before my eyes. I leaned closer to the screen, confused. There was no other woman, no phone calls, no secret meetings. Just Damien, sitting in the dark, shattered by something in that letter. I rewound the footage and watched it again, and again. No matter how many times I replayed it, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. All my assumptions, all my suspicions, were suddenly meaningless. This wasn't the behavior of a man having an affair. This was something else. Something deeper. Something worse. I had to know what was in that letter. I noted the coat, the brown one he always wore on cooler days, and where he had placed it after reading. I waited, pretending everything was normal, though my mind was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced, my body restless. I turned from side to side in bed, eyes wide open in the dark. And then, sometime around 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. Quietly, I slipped out from under the covers. Damien was fast asleep, his breathing deep and steady. The room was still, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I walked to the coat closet and reached inside, my fingers brushing the fabric until I found the envelope tucked into the inner pocket, right where he'd left it. I pulled it out, my hands shaking. I opened the letter and began to read, and then my heart sank. I didn't even need to finish the page. My eyes locked on one line, one word, dying. It was written so plainly, so coldly that I thought, I must have misread it, but it was there, right next to Damien's name. A diagnosis I couldn't even pronounce, followed by prognosis details that blurred together in my vision as tears filled my eyes. My husband was dying. My knees went weak. I sat down on the floor, clutching the paper, unable to process what I had just read. All this time, I had been preparing myself to find betrayal. I had been ready for heartbreak, but not like this. Not this. The anger I'd carried for weeks evaporated in an instant, replaced by sorrow, by confusion, and a flood of guilt. He hadn't been pulling away because of someone else. He had been carrying the weight of a secret far heavier than anything I had imagined. I gently folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope, then returned it to his coat pocket. I crept back into the bedroom, but I couldn't lie down. I couldn't close my eyes. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the sky turn from black to gray. My heart thudded in my chest, every beat full of questions, fear, and anticipation. I waited for morning. I waited for him to wake up. By the time Damien walked into the kitchen that morning, he looked worse than I had ever seen him. His face was pale, his shoulders slumped, and there were deep, shadowy circles under his eyes like bruises left by sleepless nights. His bloodshot eyes told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't rested. Not really, and maybe not for a long time. He didn't greet me with his usual quiet smile or even a glance in my direction. Instead, he moved toward the counter like he was moving through fog, slow and heavy. He poured himself a cup of coffee, hands slightly unsteady, and just stood there, staring down into the mug as though it could somehow offer him a solution, an escape, an answer, something, anything. Morning, he mumbled, barely loud enough to hear. I sat at the table watching him, heart pounding in my chest. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The weight of what I had discovered the night before pressed heavily on me, stealing my breath and tightening around my chest. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't carry the secret alone. Damien, we need to talk. The words came out shaky despite how many times I had rehearsed them in my head. My voice trembled, betraying the storm inside me, even though I tried so hard to stay calm. He turned to me slowly, his face blank at first, then tightening with unease. I caught it just for a second, that flicker of fear in his eyes. It passed quickly, but it was there. What's going on, Lacy? He asked, his voice careful, cautious. He wasn't angry, just guarded. I hesitated, then took a deep breath. I saw you last night, I said softly. I know about the letter, Damien. I saw you crying. His entire body seemed to freeze. He didn't speak. For a moment, he didn't even breathe. His hand, still holding the coffee cup, trembled before he slowly set it down. Then he looked at the floor, as if he couldn't face me, as if the truth weighed too heavily on his shoulders to lift his eyes. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't. Not yet. I didn't want you to find out this way, he said finally, his voice low, barely above a whisper. It sounded hollow and broken. What's in the letter? I asked, leaning forward. Please, Damien, just tell me the truth. He closed his eyes for a long moment. Then he inhaled deeply, like he was bracing himself for impact. I've been diagnosed with something, he said, quietly. It's not good, Lacy. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I asked, even though I felt I already knew. The fear in his voice, the look in his eyes. It wasn't something small. It wasn't something he could recover from. He finally looked at me and his eyes were filled with tears. It's cancer, he said, his voice cracking under the weight of the word. Terminal. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. The edges of my vision blurred. I reached out and grabbed the table to keep myself grounded. But nothing felt solid anymore. It was like the ground beneath me had collapsed, and I was falling with no way to stop. All the questions I had asked, all the suspicions I had carried, now seemed so small, so meaningless. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. It came out cracked and fragile. Why did you try to hide this from me? He reached across the table and took my hand in his. His grip was weak, but it trembled with emotion. His fingers were cold. Because I didn't want you to go through this, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't want you to have to watch me die. I thought if I kept it to myself, maybe it would be easier for you. I stared at him, shocked. Easier? I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. How could you think shutting me out would make this easier? We're supposed to be a team, Damien. We're supposed to face things together. That's what marriage is. You don't get to decide to go through this alone. His face crumpled. His head bowed. I know, he whispered, the regret thick in every word. I know, and I'm so sorry, my love. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now how wrong I was. I was scared, Damien had said to me, his voice barely holding together. I didn't want you to see me like this. Weak, broken. I thought I could protect you, but all I did was hurt you. His words struck something deep in me. For so long I had been angry, confused, and scared myself. But in that moment, all I saw was the man I loved, falling apart and trying to hold everything in on his own. I reached out without hesitation, pulling him into a tight embrace. My arms wrapped around his frail frame, holding him close to me, as if I could protect him from what was coming. I felt the wetness on my cheek before I even realized I was crying. I had tried to stay strong, but the pain in my chest had built up too long. Still, I held back as much as I could. This wasn't about me. This was about us. You don't have to protect me from this, I whispered against his shoulder, holding on like I might lose him at any second. I'm your wife. I want to be there for you, no matter what. We'll face this together. No more secrets. He clung to me then, his arms wrapped tightly around me, his body shaking with emotion. I could feel the heaviness in his breath, the weight he'd been carrying finally spilling out in quiet sobs. When he pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes were filled with a mixture of sorrow, love, and gratitude. I don't deserve you, Lacy, he said softly, his voice catching in his throat, but I'm so glad I have you. We stayed like that for a long time, locked in each other's arms, crying. Not just for what was happening now, but for all that we were about to lose. We cried for the fear we hadn't spoken, the pain we hadn't shared, and the time we had wasted. But from that moment forward, something shifted. The road ahead was still dark and uncertain, but we were walking it side by side. That made all the difference. In the days that followed, the sadness didn't disappear, but the silence did. Damien began to talk more. He opened up about his fears, about the anger he had kept buried, about the thoughts that had haunted him since the diagnosis. Sometimes he cried, sometimes he just needed to sit in silence, and I sat with him. I didn't always know what to say, but I was there, and that was enough. We made a promise to stop counting the time we didn't have and start making the most of the time we did. We filled our days with small joys, walks in the park when he had the strength, movie nights, curled up on the couch, just like we used to when we were younger. We even sat down together one evening and started a bucket list. Nothing extravagant, just little things we'd always talked about doing. A drive up the coast, a picnic under the stars, reading a book together, painting a room in the house, a ridiculous color, just because we could. He smiled more after that. Not all the time and not like before, but the moments of light were real. We laughed again. We talked late into the night. Sometimes we cried too, and that was okay. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast a golden hue over the backyard, we sat on the porch in quiet reflection. I remember how peaceful he looked, even though I knew the pain he carried. The wind was soft, and the sky was painted in warm shades of orange and pink. He turned to me with a small, bittersweet smile. I wish I had told you sooner, Lacy, he said, his voice quiet and filled with regret. I wasted so much time hiding from you, from us. I squeezed his hand gently. Don't think about that now, I said softly. We're here, together. That's what matters. We can't change the past, but we still have today, and we'll make every moment count. His eyes filled with tears again, but he didn't look away this time. I don't want to leave you, he said, his voice breaking, but I'm so grateful for the time we've had. You've made these last few months bearable, my bunny. I don't know how I would have done this without you. I leaned in, resting my head on his shoulder, the familiar curve where I had found comfort so many times before. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall as I wrapped my arms around him. "You don't have to do anything alone anymore, my angel," I whispered. "I'm here, every step of the way." We sat there as the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees, the sky dimming into twilight. It was quiet, but not lonely. We didn't need words in that moment. Our silence was full of understanding, of love, of all the things we had finally said, and all the things we didn't need to say anymore. Looking back, I realized something important. I had once been so certain he was hiding a betrayal. I had braced myself for a wound of the heart, but instead, I had uncovered something far more devastating. And somehow, in that heartbreak, we had found our way back to each other. Whatever time we had left, we would face it together, side by side, just as we always should have.